All right, well, why don't we dive in? We are at the top of the hour. So, welcome everyone. We are excited to connect with you today on acquisition email. And if you weren't aware that it is your hidden superpower, you are about to be convinced. So, I'm Kevin Burke, Director of Digital Marketing here at Data Axle. Before I hand it over to Lori, just two quick housekeeping items. Number one, everyone is muted. However, we are encouraging some Q&A. So, if you want to pop those into the Q&A console, we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And number two, this is being recorded and will be shared after the session in case you want to relive the magic. So, all right, so let's get to it. I'd like to introduce officially Lori Colantuno, our VP of Strategy here at Data Axle, all-knowing on all things acquisition email. So, hey there, Lori, ready to rock and roll?
Yes, let's do it. Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name, as Kevin said, is Lori Colantuno. I am the Vice President of Strategy at Data Axle. I have been here for 29 years. The last 22 I have spent actually in acquisition email, if you can believe that. It's when it first started, I believe, when we first started the internet and email. So I have a big passion for that. Currently today, I help sales and I support the sales team at Data Axle to present this strategy and this tactic to their existing customers or to prospects. I do sit within something called the Axle Agency. So I work hand in hand with our digital, our analytics team, as well as our strategy team. That's a newer group for Data Axle that came about 5 years ago, and we've really grown it since. So nice to be here today. I'm going to talk about, as Kevin mentioned, acquisition email as your hidden superpower. And I am really excited to get started on this. We're going to share some key stats of some market research that we did. We're going to talk about some of the benefits, and then we're going to jump into some pro tips. If you all are already using this as a strategy, or if you're not, some easy ways to get started that can be effective. And we're also going to just share about a little bit about metrics and how that looks. Before I start, I did want to just quickly talk about Data Axle. Since I've been here for so long, there's a reason, and it's because we are a data-first company. I love the fact that we own both a business and consumer database. Data Axle has been a leader for the last 50 years in data and the activation of data-driven marketing. So we're a trusted partner of 39 of the Fortune 100 companies out there. And one of the things we really pride ourselves on is our long-standing client relationships. And basically, that's been an average of about 12 years. Some quick stats on our data. We have a business database. We have 17.5 million businesses with about 150 million contacts within those businesses. We also have a consumer database of 165 million households with about 286 million consumers that are sitting in there. And quickly, the reason I like to talk about this, it's pretty relevant as you hear me talk about the next few slides, is because you probably don't recognize Data Axle as a household name, but if you have a car navigation system or you're doing a search on one of the top search engines on the internet, looking for a gas station or a restaurant to eat at, or business hours, or do they take credit cards? You're interacting with our data. Our data powers a lot of those platforms. And the reason I like to point that out is because it has to be good, valid, accurate data in order for it to be leveraged to the masses, right? So I always like to point out that you probably have never heard of us as a household name, but think about us next time you are Googling for a gas station or something. Okay, so let's get started. So email is one of the most effective and budget-friendly channels out there. However, not many companies are taking advantage of acquisition email when it comes to their acquisition strategies. So today, that is what I'm going to talk about with you. However, I like to keep it interactive. I do have a few questions that I'm going to be asking just right off the bat. I like to start with this one. What's the strangest thing you did while attending a Zoom meeting? Kevin's going to put up the questions here. If you could just quickly give me one of these answers. I was leaving it that it could actually be written in, but I found quickly on one of my other calls that that probably wasn't the best idea because people had some pretty crazy things out there. So feel free to to quickly answer this, I know since 2023, and prior, before, when COVID started, a lot of things have changed. So it is fun and exciting, and interesting just to hear, what people's answers are, how that looks and feels. So I'm going to just wait a minute to see if anybody's got an answer. We do have other ones as well. So Kevin, I don't know if you're seeing updates on this, but that would be.
Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and end that now. They're coming in, but here
Yeah,
you go.
perfect. Oh, I love that others, but my lips are sealed. So it looks like we have a fun crowd today. And hopefully, I'm sure none of you are doing any of these because you are absolutely just paying attention to this amazing presentation. So thank you for participating. With that said, let's ask a more relevant question. Are you a B2B, B2C, or do you market to both when, as far as the marketing tactics? Just like to get a gauge, as I mentioned, we do have a business and a consumer database, but I can change the narrative a little bit if I have to go over, more business or versus more consumer. It's just good for me to know. The reason that I say both, because we do have the ability to take our business and our consumer data and tie it together, as other databases out there can do. So it's great. It looks like it's pretty even. Some are both, which is great. And thank you. I really, again, appreciate you everybody participating. So who's familiar with acquisition email? This is just a pretty simple one. I'm just curious, level setting. Like I said, there's so many marketers out there that are, I would say over 90% of marketers are using email to talk to their customers. It's a very cost-effective, budget-friendly way, but it drives results and it drives engagement and interaction. Yet so many people on the acquisition side aren't familiar or aren't using it. So it does definitely help when I kind of understand the audience here. And that's great. So that makes me even happier that 70% of you almost are familiar. So that's terrific. Okay. And one last question, I promise. Are you using it in your acquisition strategy right now? Again, like I mentioned, when I've talked to marketers, a lot of them have either shied away from this strategy or tactic and or just aren't as educated on how to use it effectively. And so they've had some either, some bad experiences, etc. So this is always good because I get, again, a gauge of who's using this today and who's using it successfully. And I'm just going to wait one more second for Kevin to plop the answers up.
Yeah, a little bit of technical difficulty on this one here, Lori. So we'll keep going. We'll keep the train going. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so you don't have to do any more work. Your job is done. So let's define acquisition email. So acquisition email marketing is the process of using email campaigns to grow your customer base, to promote a project, a product or service or discount, etc. With sending permission-based emails to where a third-party marketer can email their offer or service to someone as a prospect that they don't have an existing relationship with. That's really the biggest key here, is that you don't have an existing relationship. So you want to make sure that the data that you're using and sending is permission-based, meaning that these prospects that you're going to email have agreed to receive third-party solicitations. Part of what I'll talk about with data a little bit later, make sure it's a compliant data source. Make sure that you can have a conversation with your partner and ask the tough questions about, legislation and compliancy and, best practices. So that's the difference between acquisition and just sending emails to your existing customers or even inactives. So why is acquisition email important? We asked marketers, 272 marketers, how important is it to your organization that your marketing department acquires new customers through a marketing strategy? And as you can see, 70% of new customer acquisition, 70% of marketers say new customer acquisition is in the top 3. And that's just what I've seen in all of my years. The biggest thing that marketers are challenged with is growing their data, right? Growing their database, growing their marketing strategies. However, acquisition email is often overlooked. And I kind of alluded to it before, that marketers are either unsure about compliance, they're unsure about how to leverage data, and they're also unsure about, is it legal? Is it compliant? And the one I hear all the time, which I'm not offended, I have thick skin, is that it's spammy. And so you're right? That's the reputation acquisition email used to have. But when it's done in the right way, I'm going to show you some amazing case studies that when it's done properly, it works, and it works well. So we asked our marketers, to that point, the benefits. Where are you seeing a benefit? Do you see a higher ROI? Again, email is such an inexpensive channel. 77% of marketers said when they include it in part of their marketing strategy for acquisition, they do see a higher ROI. Part of that, and why I love this channel, and I've been doing this for so long, is the one-to-one attribution. There's no surprises. You know exactly who you are marketing to. And you can measure this channel just like you could 25 years ago with direct mail. You can measure the acquisition email programs you're sending out in the same type of way. The benefit, though, is it's quick. You get quick response. You can pivot quickly if you need to. And it's a very nimble channel that allows you to test, review results, and make different optimized suggestions or recommendations going forward to even do better. And then we asked every generation across the board, from boomers to Gen Zs, what is the channel that you prefer to hear from brands? And if, except for, I get Gen Zs, I understand it. Email's got a close second there, though. So I'm still going to hold faith there, that it's email. And this is really telling. All of the channels kind of go, pretty steadily. There's a few spikes with social, which is expected. But email, they want to hear from brands in email. So then why are brands not promoting themselves to these targeted prospects in this channel, right? They're telling you this is how they want to hear from you. So this is just a great little eye-opening part of, again, also omnichannel strategy, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, but also how email plays such an important role in that first touch within an omnichannel strategy. So let's get to some of the fun things, like the tips that I'm going to pull out for you. There's 6 altogether. I think originally we said 5, but we added 1. The first and foremost is smart segmentation. If you've never done this before, but it looks like 70% of you have, which is great. The best thing to do is to start out, especially if you're using a new vendor or a new data provider, is you do want to know who you're marketing to. You want to build a custom audience. So there's multiple ways that you can do that. Some vendors can build out profiles and models for you against your best customers. And this is, what we recommend. Every vendor does it a little differently. But looking at who your best customers are and then creating those lookalikes are really a great way to dip your toe in the water in this channel for the first time. Looking at things like gender, marital status, education, presence of children, all of these different moving pieces can really help you nail down exactly the perfect prospect that you should be marketing to. But on top of that, you can get even deeper. You can get into transactional data, lifestyle, hobbies, interests. You can even get into some, intent and change of family status. Maybe somebody had a baby or is getting married. All these things together to put real thoughtful and mindfulness around who you're going to target for these promotions can be extremely effective. So you build out this custom audience and you can activate it in email. And let's not forget, you can also take that email audience and activate it in your social or your display ads. And again, because email is so measurable, it's really easy to understand if your email is giving a boost to those channels or if it's just staying sort of flat. So again, super measurable and can be leveraged in multiple ways. The next one, and this is one we've really focused on here at Data Axle for the last year and a half, is engagement activity. So knowing who's engaging and then targeting them. It's really difficult with acquisition email. It's a very different process of collecting emails than you do with your retention side, mostly because these people haven't asked to hear from you. And you can do hygiene, and I recommend that any vendor you use, you make sure you ask about their hygiene process, who they're using for hygiene, how often do they hygiene, do they have things like an IP address and a time date stamp and a URL where that email came from and permissioned into. All of these things play a role. However, at the end of the day, until we start mailing, we really are kind of, trying to figure it out by models and analytics. But when you can get some actual activity and engagement data that you can put onto your file that you're going to be mailing, it can be astronomical, the difference in how your results come out. Here we call it exhaust data. I've heard it called active event data, active email data, exhaust data. They're all kind of synonymous together. But knowing who's active and responsive to emails is a really valuable piece of data. And if you can find vendors that have first-party engagement activity, like we've partnered with a company that collects this data from first-party brands, where they're engaging with their brands on an ongoing basis. That data is blindly fed back based just on the email address. We don't know much else, but we know that that email was opened by a brand that they work with every day. And we know it was opened in the last 14 days or the last 30 or 60 or 90 days, or even in the last year. It's still valuable. It's still a valuable email address. So overlaying that kind of data to your perfect prospect, your perfect custom audience that you've built really does drive success. Now, we can use this for acquisition. So when we're building out a file for one of our clients, we can overlay this information, but customers can also use it on your house file. If you're having trouble with deliverability or inboxing at a specific domain, or you want to run a reactivation campaign, you can also leverage this activity or exhaust data to do that as well. So here we have an example. Data Axle also has a very large nonprofit group. And one of our clients that we had been working with for a long time was really struggling with delivery and inbox deliverability specifically. They also weren't hitting their KPIs with their donors that they had hoped, and they were looking for us to give them a solution. So what we did is we took some of their data of their current donors, and we overlaid this exhaust data score. We ran it through all the scores. As long as there was activity on on the emails, we overlaid those scores with it. Then they did a head-to-head test with their regular data that wasn't scored versus the data that had this activity data, this event data on there. And what you can see here, I know open rates, if you're not familiar, iOS 15 has been kind of a little a nudge for us as far as measuring opens. However, we measure clicks, and we really focus on clicks. 98% higher clicks they had with the scored engagement data than through their active email audience. And that's huge. So they have been now running their file every quarter through this process, and they're showing great success. So it doesn't just have to be for acquisition. It's also for reactivation or troubleshooting. It's a great tactic to try. Something else, a lot of times when I speak with marketers and they say, email doesn't work, acquisition email does not work, I'll start to peel back the onion and I'll understand and find out that they've mailed one email campaign and it was for 1 million emails one time and they got nothing out of it and it didn't work. So if I could see you, I wonder if any of you were nodding, because usually when I give these in person, I always get 1 or 2 nods. That sending multiple emails in a steady cadence really has proven to be so effective. What we do here and what I recommend that you do for any vendors that you're working with is really talking about your cadence of how you're going to message to these people. First and foremost, like I said, identify that perfect prospect. Then you can overlay engagement data if you'd like. And now it comes time to talk to them. So what we recommend, is doing what we call a 3x1. You're sending once a week to the audience that you pulled, and you're sending that over a 3-week period. So it's going to be 3 email sends. You're going to send once a week. Example, if you have 100 emails and you want to send to those people in week 1, then you take those 100 emails, you send them again in week 2 and again in week 3. What we've seen by doing this is, don't forget, these are permission based, meaning they are able to receive third-party solicitations, but they're not asking to see your brand specifically. So they're not used to seeing you in their inbox. They don't know if it's relevant. They don't know if it's something that's junk. So what they want to do is you want to make sure every week you send them something that makes sense and really resonates with them, that's going to allow them to start to engage and click. Depending on your budget, you can do different creatives. You can do different offerings. If you want to make something more time sensitive, you can change the subject line if you don't have resources to do those other things. So there's lots of ways that you can make this an effective learning proof of concept, so that going forward, you can figure out what's the best responsive email, creative that you used, or what's the best call to action. By sending to that same person time over time, we've seen anywhere from a 10 to 20% engagement increase in the engagement, in the click. So of course, what are you going to share with them, right? Tip number 4, compelling creative. What does that look like? What does your creative look like? It's got to be a little bit different than your retention stream, only because they've never heard of your brand. They didn't ask to hear from you. So you really have to make a compelling story as to why. Why should I open this email? What is in it for me? And so when you work with a company, you want to make sure that you understand the creative best practices and have them look at your acquisition program to make sure that the emails are looking valid. One of the big things is that we get, I would say 90%, maybe even 95% of clients that come to us already have a creative in place. So they don't need us to build creative. At Data Axle, we do have an award-winning creative team, which I'll talk about, but most of the content that comes over is already done. So by the time we get it, we want to make sure, even though it's already finished, you want to make sure that your partner evaluates it and make sure it's got all of the key components, like a good subject line, a good image to text ratio, your logos and fonts are going to be delivered. You want to make sure that you've got your key selling points listed out clearly. You want to make sure if you're putting a social marketing element or a strong call to action in multiple places. These are all the things that we're going to advise you to ask your partners to help you with. This is an email that we actually created for a partner, and just obviously we made this generic for right now, but basically this was a solar company looking to increase their visibility and get new customers. So you'll see here the subject line and from line, discover the many benefits of solar. It's intriguing. It's a good subject line that kind of might pique your interest, especially if you're marketing to somebody that would be relevant to this. This says broadcast, but you always want to do a friendly from. You always put the marketer's name. Even though you're not using your own sending domains, you still want the marketer's friendly from to be from you. And then what you can see here is right off the bat, you've got add value without spending a fortune with a picture of a home. Right there above the fold, we're saying, hey, you can add value without spending a lot of money. And obviously there's solar panels, so you kind of get an idea of what this is. So you keep reading because it's relevant to who's getting this email. Then you put in a strong call to action, really smart to do, especially if you have an ebook or a newsletter or something along those lines. You want to be able to collect leads. And this is a great way to get leads collected, is you give them an informational ebook that talks a little bit about the benefits and why your company. And if you don't have an ebook, that's okay. Just put some sort of call to action right up front. And then you want to do more advantages. And answers why them, why should they reach out to you? Why should they keep reading and engage? I usually recommend 3 to 5 bullets highlighting your expertises or what is different about your company versus the competition. And then of course, there's another strong call to action at the end. You've kept them reading this long. You want to make sure you give them direction on where they need to go next. And then you want to add your corporate address and unsubscribe link. That again is just can spam compliance. And if you don't have the ability to use or leverage your retention unsubscribes, make sure your partners, I'm sure that they can then host unsubscribes on your behalf. That's really important. And you want to make sure you're collecting those. So how did that campaign run? It was the same thing that we talked about earlier as far as a 3-week campaign drip. They wanted to, again, try to increase the amount of new customers. They were using search engine optimization, a little bit of door-to-door prospecting, but they were really looking for people that would sign up to have an appointment and ultimately sign a contract to buy solar. So what Data Axle did is we identified the perfect prospects for them. And basically it was living in a single family home, target within their 9 states. And we actually, I believe for this one, we did pull, we have a modeled credit worthiness. It's not like a credit score. It's just the likelihood that, their credit is good based on open lines of credit and things of that nature. So we did pull that in here too, because with solar, I believe you have to have a 700 or 680 or higher credit score. So that was important to them. We did a 3-week campaign that we identified 5 million perfect prospects with the custom audience we built. And then we ran a 3-week series, again, hitting that same audience 3 times, once a week over a 3-week period. We were able to target by the zip codes where they actually have service that they're giving out. As you can see, the campaign generated a huge engagement. And more importantly, we generated from that, we had 15 million total emails that went out, the same audience 3 times, 5,000 new appointments and 1,000 new contracts generated. And that was huge. And now this isn't a returning client of ours. We're starting to do other initiatives with them. But more importantly, this was just an email program. So there was no other omnichannel solution here. This was straight email, and it has proven to work out really, really nicely for them. Tip number 5, measurement. So I talked about how email is a one-to-one direct attribution, which I love about this channel. But what you want to do is when you're talking and you're setting up your campaign right up front, have a conversation about KPIs and measurement. If a customer comes to me and says, I want last click attribution to be the tell-all here, a lot of times I'll say that I don't think that's going to work. Email isn't a great last touch attribution as far as measurement goes. It takes a little bit more digging to really uncover how well this channel works. So you want to keep an open mind and have mindful conversations with your partners about how you're measuring attribution. What we do is we call ours a matchback attribution, and I'm sure that other partners are doing the same type of thing. Once a program completes, again, email is a very measurable tactic, so we can take a delivered file of first name, last name, and postal address and match it to your whoever purchased your product or signed up for your service. Clients send us new members over the period that an email program ran, and they'll send us the first name, last name. They'll send us an email. If they can send us $1 spent, that's even better, because then we can really understand the return on ad spend. And we perform this matchback analysis with our delivered email file. The reason we look at the postal, and the reason that I always like to put this out there, is because a lot of times an email will come in, somebody can open it, they can even click through, but they might get sidetracked, and then maybe they just go to the website. Or if it's a super club, they get an email and then they don't need anything right now, so they go to the store and they sign up there. So there's lots of different ways that people can engage with your brand when they're seeing an email. They could see an email, then they could see it on television. Then they could come back next week and see another email. Then they see a display ad. They're being spoken to in all these different channels. So you want to make sure you're measuring the effectiveness of an actual email being sent to a prospect. And that's done by looking at the first name, last name, and postal. Because you can also, if you're working with a vendor, you want to make sure that you have a holdout group so you can see the effects of email versus no email. If there's a television promotion or if there's something else that they're marketing to, because you want to really prove out that this channel does work and is a great brand supporter. The other one thing to note is many times, I'm sure everyone on this phone has at least 2, probably a work and a home email, but you could have others. I have 3 personal emails. I'm getting married next year, and I have a wedding email. I have lots of emails, right? So depending on the vendor and who I'm engaging with, I decide which email I'm going to use. So my marketing messages when I sign up for promotions or things like that is my Yahoo, but my Gmail is where I actually sign up for things. So again, the attribution and keeping an open mind about this channel and how you give this channel credit is really imperative to its success. So this was a direct link to this conversation. An optometry office that we work with has over 600 offices around the country, mostly based on the East Coast, I believe. They wanted to, again, just expand. They wanted to find a cost-effective way to get their message to bring people into the office. So what we did is we did 3 unique drops. It was about 4 million prospects total that we wound up emailing. And what we did is we picked out a mile radius around each optometry office and if somebody wore glasses or contacts. So again, this is where that targeting and the really digging into the data to make sure you've got the perfect person is imperative to your success. We ran three campaigns over the course of the 3 weeks, just like I had talked about earlier. And I love this case study because it just gets me excited about the channel. But 38% of the people that came into that office matched to a delivered email from our campaign, 38%. It cost the client $68,000, but patient spend, so not only were we driving people to the store, but they were spending money, was $479,000. They've been a client of ours for over 2 years and continue to drive traffic and see really strong results with this channel. You know, a 3+ times over return on ad spend. I mean, what isn't great about this? And finally, I like just quickly to talk about omnichannel approaching. I know that this was an email hidden superpower conversation, but anything that you saw here as far as the data and the segmentation and all of that, you should really consider also onboarding into digital and social, even direct mail. What's great about email, like I said earlier, is it can be a great supporting actor and that great first touch that somebody first engages and sees your brand. And then you're supporting it with a direct mail piece or a social media campaign to that same audience. You put them on your email, you send them in your mailbox, and then you're going to onboard them into Facebook or digital. It's a great way to bring this custom audience that you're working so hard to figure out to life. So a quick recap, we talked about smart segmentation. Smart segmentation, making sure you take your customers and you know who your perfect prospect is by building out some profile analysis or models based off of that. How to make sure you improve your engagement and activity by looking at exhaust data, what we call exhaust data, or active emails. Find vendors that are good, solid sources that can provide this type of information, and you will definitely see a spike in your house file as well as your acquisition efforts. A strong cadence of sending multiple emails over the course of a 1-month minimum period. Sometimes we even like to go out for a 3-month proof of concept, but it really depends on budget and timing. But sending multiple emails to the same audience, that repetition is really key. A compelling creative, tell them what's in it for them. Why should they click? Why should they engage with your brand? And why are you better than all the other emails they're seeing? Measurement, you have to have a mindful, thoughtful conversation around KPIs. It's the best way that you'll have the best outcome because everybody level sets and understands the goals and the expectations that they're looking for. And finally, an omni-channel approach. You want to try to activate this, not just in email, but really leveraging all of the channels and building out a mindful strategy that makes this even more effective when it's supporting other channels. And then clean data, of course, as I started out my conversation, I've been here for this long because I love data and I love the way that we compile data, and making sure that your vendor has clean data is the foundation of your success for these programs. Now, I thank you all for listening. If you'd like to scan the QR code here, we are giving out, again, we have an award-winning creative team that does amazing work. If you're interested in looking at some of our work, we have a really beautiful lookbook that we can share. But they are offering a free creative audit, whether it's acquisition or a retention email that you might be struggling with. Feel free to scan this QR code and we will let somebody know out of the 183 people I think that were here who is a winner. So that's it for me. So Kevin, I see some questions in the Q&A. So do you want to just kind of go through them quickly or?
I will do that. That was fantastic, Lori. So if this is our hidden superpower, does that make you our superhero? I'm just actually
Well,
connecting the
yes,
dots now.
of course. I like to think so. I contemplated my Wonder Woman shirt, but I said no, not for this.
Excellent, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll rattle off a couple quick questions for you here. I'll combine a couple. Some of them were similar and shows that folks are really leaning in. So on your 3x1 slide,
Yep.
why not 4 emails? Why not 5 emails? And are you suggesting different content for each of the emails?
So depending on budget, first of all, with the content, I'll start there. Depending on your budget, if you have the means and you can get 3 different creatives, we would recommend trying different creatives to kind of change it up and see which one's responding well. You can even split your initial audience to do an A/B test with different creatives and then roll out with in weeks 2 and 3. The reason for 3 weeks, it just seems to be like that golden number that people aren't getting annoyed, but they're engaging. And so that's just what we found. There could be a 4th touch, of course, and we would test that and see if it really drives lift, depending on your offer or what your vertical is, or if 3 is enough, and then you start to switch off to a new audience. So it really is dependent on your vertical and your messaging.
How would you categorize the results B2B versus B2C in this channel?
So that's interesting. I actually had a B2B use case and I should have included it. So B2B, we are very strong in the B2B space. Again, we've had clients that have been mailing millions of emails a month for many, many years. We did have an instance where they were mailing with us for a very long time and they started to see a little bit of a drop, right? The deliverability was getting a little tougher. Engagement wasn't really there. And we actually appended these scores, these engagement scores, to a subset of the file and did a test. And boom, we saw the lift go right back up, and deliverability went back up, engagement went back up, and it was really successful. So from a B2B measurement, it's pretty much online with consumer. It's just a matter of, what your offering is. And pretty much now we're seeing clicks pretty average with B2B and B2C. There isn't a huge difference in the engagement.
Mm-hmm. All right, someone else typed in, can they use custom audiences built for other channels for acquisition email?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at your social channel, we could definitely take a look at that and then apply it to the data, or send that to your vendor to take a look at. It's still in that digital mindset. Why we like to look at doing the modeling is just because we want to understand and make sure there's not a secret pocket of data that we could be leveraging to make it more effective. But yeah, if you've already built a social channel model, there's no reason why you couldn't use that custom audience for email.
I think this may be a question that a lot of folks would love the answer to. If a prospect they're emailing is not familiar with their brand, what can they do to make sure they actually open their emails that they are sending to them?
Yep. Yeah, so we have a bunch of different creative options that we can share. Subject line is first and foremost. And, we can look at your subject line and we can give you information. There are companies out there that literally all they do is create compelling subject lines. That's really going to be one of the biggest differentiators is your subject line. And, that first above the fold, getting in front of them right away, because they're not going to be familiar with your brand, most likely, or they haven't asked to be familiar with your brand. So you're going to have to do a little convincing. That's why that above the fold, having a good, strong, what's in it for me, and a strong subject line is going to get them to at least open the email and take it from there.
Awesome. A couple of folks are asking if this will be shared via email. Absolutely, this will be shared to you all by tomorrow, this presentation. Kind of a fundamental question here, the difference between acquisition email and, say, emailing from your marketing automation platform. What are the differences there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of times clients will ask us, well, can't you just give us the data and we'll send it out on our platform? So I'm going to tell you right now, most of your ESPs and your marketing automation platforms are not going to agree to send acquisition emails out on there. And the reason for that is those domains have been specifically developed and warmed up to receive marketing messaging from you, the brand. And so there's really, could do damage to those to those domains if you start sending acquisition email cold on those domains. That's why we recommend using a partner that has acquisition email experience, that's warmed up domains for marketing purposes and warmed up domains that are shared to receive these third-party solicitations. So I always highly recommend you let an acquisition marketer do the dirty work for you and then drive the leads into your marketing automation platforms.
Awesome. Another question going back to your 3x1 slide, that's got a lot of attention there. So the same audience for all three emails, or should we experiment with audiences?
So you obviously will experiment with audiences, but you do a 3-touch to the same exact audience. So again, they get used to seeing your brand and they get used to seeing the data, the information coming through, and ultimately start to trust. It's kind of like I segmented just like, if you meet someone for the first time, you're not going to get married right away, right? You have to kind of get used to them, get used to knowing them, and then you might bite on that in, months to come. So same thing with email. You're seeing your brand in this channel for the first time. So you want to make sure that you can absolutely, get that brand recognition, keep engaging with them, and ultimately they will bite.
Awesome. How long should people wait to see results in this tactic before they pivot?
So that's a great question, and it is unique to each client. Some are a really long tail. So like in the solar example, it's from getting the appointment to the conversion of that appointment, can take time depending on, some clients it takes 30 days, some clients it takes 60 days. Some it's a 6-month tail. I would say on average, you should start doing your matchback analysis on average, depending on your vertical and your product, 30 days after. So give it 30 days to kind of have a tail off of the last email that's been sent, and then start collecting the data and the information. But again, like solar, maybe a little bit longer than that.
Cool. Lori, a couple are interested in knowing how you handle non-openers. Resend, leave them alone. How do we handle those folks?
So back before the iOS 15 update, which really was about, and we can send information if you're not familiar with this, but iOS 15 basically gave false, when they did that update, it allowed for some false open data, basically marking someone as an open when they really weren't. So prior to that, yes, we absolutely treated and separated people who didn't open at all to people that did open and just never clicked. So we used to make that distinction, but because of iOS 15 and because open rates are kind of all over the place, we take the approach that we are just going to remail to anyone that opened. Some marketers want us to remove anybody that clicked, which we can do. And some you may want to just mail to everybody. So we definitely will remarket to all of the open or non-openers, and the same way at this point.
Got it. You may have touched on this, but I'll ask it again. How long to wait before trying different audiences?
Yeah, so you can start. So let's say it's a 3-week program. You take a week to kind of evaluate the engagement at a low level, right? Just to kind of get a quick feel for how things are going, and then start going that following week with your next audience. And you can kind of keep this as an evergreen and just keep rotating through. And then you can circle back again to the people that haven't, that you started with. You can start to re-engage with them. Now, in the case of the solar company, they're actually mailing to everybody in their footprint over the course of, they start 3 weeks, they take a pause, they start 3 weeks, they take a pause. They're doing the same audience over and over and over. So if your budget allows for you to mail to everybody, you can. A lot of marketers, at first, their budget doesn't allow for that. So that's why we'll split it up into some, smaller cadences.
Cool. And a couple of requests to just quickly kind of recap the exhaust data piece that you touched on during your slides.
Yeah, so the exhaust data is data it comes from a company that we partner with, and there are companies out there that collect this first-party actionable data. And basically, again, what that is that's when a brand is working with you as a customer and you're clicking on that brand's messaging. There are companies that are collecting that click activity to help these brands market better, showing them better time of day to mail, how their retention audience, how their customers are engaging with them as a brand. Is there a day or time of the week that works better for one person over another, etc. So they're collecting all of this activity and events that are happening. And again, it's agnostic to us. We don't know the brands they're working with, but they've given us access to at least understand an active email. And so we know that this Lori clicked on an email 2 weeks ago, and maybe Kevin clicked on an email 6 months ago, but we still know it's an active email that's engaging with brands that they are, wanting to receive communication from. We can send out a little bit more on that. I know it's a little confusing. It's just a tactic that we found that's starting to really work and rise the data up to the top. So I'm happy to send something in a little bit more explanation on it.
Awesome, Lori. This has been awesome. I love the questions coming in. I think I got to all of them. The last one that just popped in, is this live or pre-recording? We are live. We are as live as it gets right now.
Yes.
Absolutely. Love the questions. So, Lori, this was great. I think we got through all of the questions. We are right at time, folks. Listen, thanks everyone for joining. Lori, thank you for stepping us through all of this. At the conclusion of this webinar, once I close it, we would love to know how you think we did. You're going to get a quick survey to pop up on your screen with 5 questions. If you could give us another 30 seconds of your time, let us know how we did. We would love to get that feedback and potentially continue the conversation. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.